If you have ever had a task you needed to do, and instead you found yourself cleaning a drawer, making tea, or scrolling on your phone, even while feeling stressed about it, there's actually a very specific reason for that. And it has much more to do with your nervous system than your discipline. Because what looks like procrastination from the outside is often something very different happening internally. And later, I'm going to explain the one moment when procrastination usually breaks because it reveals something important about how the nervous system works. And once you see that moment clearly, a lot of procrastination suddenly starts to make much more sense.
Everything you do tomorrow, but you got a lot to do today.
Hi, how are you today? I'm Jill. I spent more than 25 years working as a psychotherapist, helping people understand how early experiences can shape the patterns we carry into adult life. On this channel, we explore these patterns together. If you're new here, you are very welcome. And if you're returning, it's really good to have you back. At the beginning, a task often looks straightforward. Send the email, write the report, start tidying that messy cupboard. But something subtle can happen. The task stops being just a task and it starts carrying meaning. You might think, this needs to be really good, or people are going to see this, or what if I get it wrong? So now the brain isn't just processing an action, it's processing possible consequences. And once you notice this happening in yourself, you start to realize it isn't random at all. It's about judgment or fear of failure or fear that you're going to let someone down. And the moment the brain senses something as emotionally overwhelming, it shifts how it responds. Instead of moving forward easily, it hesitates because the emotional weight of the task is getting heavier and heavier. And as that builds, the perceived risk of it going wrong starts to grow too. And this is where a lot of people start assuming there's something wrong with them, when actually something very predictable is happening in the brain. I want to tell you about a stress response that most people forget. Most of us have heard of the fight or flight response, when the brain senses danger and the body prepares to act. But there's another response that shows up a lot when people feel overwhelmed, and that is freeze. Freeze happens when the nervous system registers something as too much to handle in that moment. Instead of speeding up, everything slows down. And this is the moment many people start thinking they've lost motivation, when in reality, the nervous system has simply shifted into protection mode. You might find your mind goes foggy, or the task starts to feel impossible, and even small decisions feel strangely heavy and confusing. From the outside, it can look like procrastination. But internally, it often feels more like being stuck or shut down, like a switch has been flipped and you are frozen. A lot of people describe it in this way. I know exactly what I need to do, I just can't start. You see, the gap between knowing and doing is often a nervous system signal. And this is why procrastination can feel so confusing from the inside. Here's something that surprises many people. The people who struggle most with procrastination are often really capable. They are often thoughtful, responsible, and hard on themselves. And this is the part most productivity advice completely misses. Sometimes people care so much about doing something well that the pressure quietly builds until the task starts to feel overwhelming. And this happens when the task has become so emotionally charged. A task on paper might seem simple, but emotionally it could carry a lot of weight. Take something ordinary like sending an email. Logically, it takes less than 2 minutes if it's not too long, but emotionally, it might carry questions like, what if I say the wrong thing? What if they think this sounds stupid? What if I missed something important? So the brain doesn't just process the task, it processes the risk attached to the task. And once you see this pattern, procrastination starts to make a lot more sense. And when the brain senses social or emotional risk, it reacts in a very predictable way. It looks for relief. And that relief loop reinforces procrastination. Let's say you're feeling pressure about starting something. Your nervous system is tense. So you do something small instead. You scroll through your phone, you check another message, you tidy something nearby. Procrastination has a strange ability to make suddenly reorganizing a kitchen drawer feel extremely important. And almost instantly, the tension drops a little. That tiny drop in stress teaches the brain something powerful. Avoidance reduces discomfort. This is often the moment that when people realize their brain wasn't trying to sabotage them, it was simply trying to reduce pressure. You might recognize this moment when you avoid a task and maybe avoid it all day. Then late in the evening, you finally start it, and then you realize, oh, that wasn't actually too bad. Often the hardest part isn't the task, it's the anticipation of the task. If you're recognizing yourself in this, you are definitely not the only one. This pattern shows up consistently in therapy rooms. And this is the moment I mentioned earlier, the moment procrastination breaks, because it reveals something important. The threat was never the task itself, it was the anticipation of the task. For some people, procrastination connects to early experiences around performance or criticism. If someone grew up in an environment where mistakes were heavily criticised or expectations were extremely high, the nervous system can quietly learn this association. Trying, exposing ourselves to that risk means we're exposing ourselves to potential criticism or judgment. So in later life, tasks that involve evaluation, maybe writing something, presenting something, sending work to someone, can trigger that old pattern. Even when logically you know the situation is safe. These patterns aren't flaws. And for many people, this is where procrastination stops feeling like a personal failure. They're often adaptations that once helped you navigate pressure. It's as simple as that. One of the most painful parts of procrastination is the internal commentary that follows it, the story that we tell ourselves. People often say things to themselves like, why am I like this? I am so lazy. I should be able to do this. But self-criticism activates the same threat system in the brain that created the overwhelm in the first place. So instead of helping motivation, it increases the stress, which increases the avoidance, which increases the shame. And people can end up stuck in that cycle for years. And sometimes one small shift can help. So the goal isn't forcing yourself harder. It's lowering the sense of threat just enough to begin. Sometimes the most helpful step is making the task feel smaller. Yes, it is a tiny puppy. And while it might be unrelated, a brief moment can surprisingly regulate us when we're discussing heavier topics. Okay, one way to make the task feel smaller is a very simple rule. Instead of committing to finishing the whole task, commit to 3 minutes of starting it. Open the document, write one messy sentence, sketch one rough idea, just 3 minutes. You see, when the brain believes something is small and contained, it often relaxes just enough for movement to begin. And once people start, the nervous system frequently shifts out of that frozen state. And interestingly, the moment that people understand this about themselves, their relationship with procrastination often begins to soften. My hope with this video is that it helps you to begin to understand what's happening inside when procrastination shows up. And that might make it a little easier to let go of some of that guilt and self-blame. Procrastination is usually framed as a productivity problem, but very often it's actually about how the nervous system manages pressure. When something feels overwhelming, the system tries to protect you from that stress. Sometimes that protection shows up as delay. And when people start approaching procrastination with curiosity instead of criticism, something important shifts. The nervous system begins to settle. Starting becomes a little bit easier, not through force, but through understanding. If this explanation resonated with you, I'll genuinely be interested to hear what task you've been putting off lately. Sometimes simply naming it is the first step towards starting it. So mine, I have a pile of paperwork and some forms I need to fill out that have been waiting for a while. So later today, when I have a space, I'm just going to commit to doing 3 minutes. Just start it for 3 minutes and see how it goes. If this video was helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. Next week, I'd like to explore something that often sits underneath people pleasing and how these patterns can begin in childhood and how understanding that can slowly help us rebuild more self-trust. And until then, you take good care. Bye for now.